Live on the mics. 5, 4, 3.
Welcome, everyone, and pull up a seat at the table. It's Lunchtime in Rome. Tonight's episode 246 is entitled Mike Pietragallo. Mike has led an incredible life of service to his country, family, and CrossFit community. It will be great having him at the table this evening. So pull up a seat and join us. First-time listeners can subscribe on your favorite podcast app or watch us live or later at youtube.com/lunchtime in Rome. Visit us at lunchtimeinrome.com, and while there, you can take our relational needs questionnaire. Make sure to follow us on all social media, and it would be great if you gave us a 5-star review. Jay, what specifically is this podcast about?
Being alone is the worst. Good times aren't as good, and bad times are worse when you're all alone. Romans 12:15 says to rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. That is how you keep people from being alone and what this podcast is all about. We demonstrate that in the first 15 minutes of the podcast, and we talk about it for the rest. So while it may not be 12:15 in Rome, we're treating it like it is
Lunchtime
in Rome.
Rome.
With Mike Pietragallo.
That's right.
With Mike.
We're here.
We are here.
Starting off right.
You should.
With my ums. But had a good daddy-daughter day at Kennywood on Sunday. Mm-hmm. We were looking, I didn't know what we were going to do. And I just made the last minute decision. We have Kennywood passes, so we can just go for a few hours. But I've talked about this a little bit, but this has been her like breakout year into Kennywood. So we're riding the bigger rides. So like I got on the pirate ship with her. That was like so much fun. I did take my like nausea medicine.
Like a man.
Like that's right. But like, dude, I was like, after we went back to back, because like, there was no lines. It was awesome. This past Sunday, yeah. Wow. It was great. And like she got on the wave swinger like 3 times in a row. Like she just kept on getting on. It was awesome. But after twice on the pirate ship, my tummy, you know, like the man says.
Even with the meds.
Even with the meds. I was like, we got to go do something else, Buck. Like it was just too much. But
see, that motion for me, I'm good because it's just like up and down, back and forth. It's the round and round.
I can't do that.
Yeah.
Mike, as a guy who spent a few minutes on water, do you get like motion sickness at amusement parks?
It depends on the ride, but absolutely.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, God, for sure. And I'll tell you when it was worse, when this is embarrassing. When I was in flight school, right? I was in the Navy, and I ended up in flight school. You know, basic flight was easy. I mean, it wasn't too bad. But when we got into ACM, air combat maneuvers, dogfighting, it was absolutely horrible.
yeah.
Well, see, that makes sense. That should be bad.
Do you get used to that after a while, though?
I didn't.
You didn't?
I didn't. I mean, I would take, was it Dramamine, I think?
Yeah.
I would take Dramamine. And what was actually kind of funny, and it never got sick during the maneuvers, right? And the picture controlled airspace, right? So we're out over the Gulf at Pensacola, and you get out there and you fly together. You know, you practice formation work on the way out, and then you break up. One aircraft goes long, you kind of orbit around, and then when you call fights on, you both come at each other, and then, you know, who gets turned around first, you know, that kind of thing. And you go multiple engagements, you know, you knock it off, somebody gets advantage, knock it off and reset. Every blessed time we would reset. A couple times I just tell the instructor, I was like, extend. And he's like, means like fly further out.
Yeah.
And I mean, air sickness bag.
Yeah.
But one time it was actually funny because I was in such a hurry to get the next engagement. They're like, almost like little, like the white colored trash can liners you have in your kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like that color, right? And they come in these slick little envelopes, and you keep a lot of them in your G-suit pockets. So I'd break one out, and I'm like, extend. So the way the canopy's set up, they're like little mirrors so that, you know, you can see the person in the front can see the person in the back. So as we're engaged in the next go, I didn't secure it because I knew I'd need it again. So I've got this in one hand.
Oh, gosh.
And I'm pressing against the canopy, and I'm looking, and I'm like, he's on our right, he's on our left, whatever. And all of a sudden, I hear the instructor start to go,
Oh, no.
He's like, put that damn bag down. Because I guess, like, as I was holding it up, like, sun shining through it.
Wafting.
It's like a kaleidoscope of colors. I was like, who knew? You know, but yeah, that's my
That's what it's like being on the pirate ship at Kennywood.
Same. Right? Same.
Basically, the
Back
same
to back.
thing.
Same.
Next time, bring some back.
Yeah.
But it was a good day with her, and those moments are kind of few and far in between sometimes. You know,
Sure.
especially right now. But like it was good.
Enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah, enjoy it while it
Okay,
lasts.
old man.
Yeah. I did this thing over the weekend. I think on Sunday it was called disc golf.
Yeah.
Have you guys heard of that?
Yeah. Brian used
Yeah.
to play with us every once in a while, and now he doesn't.
Yeah, except for on Sunday.
Now he's
I
back
did.
to every once in a while.
Yeah, now I'm back to every once in a while.
I love it.
It was. I had so much fun. I'm so glad that I went out and with you and Chris. And
Couple hours.
Yeah, it was great.
Couple
I was
of miles.
sweating like I was like, okay, I really have not been moving as much recently as I used to. So
It's still 14 floors of elevation change
Wait, where did you guys play?
at the
the
church.
church.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a lot up and down. Yeah.
I loved how Chris. I guess through the app now they give you the statistics like
For whatever
steps
reason,
and-
on Apple, it automatically does it. With my phone, it just gives me how far I went. It doesn't say the number of steps. Yeah, it just says like the total distance or something.
But I really like that, and I like the elevation change thing. 14 floors.
14 floors.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
There's a
So-
course up in Wexford that's 72 floors of elevation.
Is that what it is?
change.
72?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
There's only 3 holes out of 18 that don't have some uphill climb on it. It's a lot of work.
Like some of the holes you need to get out like your rappelling gear. And that's a
Goats
big-
go past.
that's-
Yeah,
It's a big course. But yeah, so that was a lot of fun. Back from New York, it's nice to be back. New York we got the thing done. I guess that's the best way to say it. Got the thing done that I needed to go there to do.
You've been doing that a lot.
Yeah, it's one thing.
well, they've been doing a
after
lot
the
of
other.
trying to get the thing done.
Well, but I mean, like we got this thing done, we got that thing done.
There's always another thing.
We are
It's
on a
always another
journey.
thing.
We are
Yeah.
on a journey of getting things done. And
Put the spoiler on the Jetta.
I guess you could say that.
Still in the Jetta.
While there were some things that didn't make it onto this version of the Jetta,
The Jetta being the
the
software.
Jetta being
Yeah.
the software and the
Cadillac you've promised.
wasn't a Cadillac. It's not a Cadillac.
Not yet.
It's
Not yet.
It was supposed to be.
All in due time.
So yeah. So anyways, glad to be back. Glad to have played disc golf. Got the pool going. Not quite open yet, but it's almost there. So yeah.
Maggie asks once a day, at least.
Aw.
Tell her we're close. Tell her.
I will. I
Tell her
will.
5 more minutes.
Because
that's like
can't
your-
do that.
That's your thing at the pool. Like 5 more minutes, and then it's like whatever. 20 minutes later.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I had a marriage revelation an hour before the podcast.
All right.
Changes everything.
Joe had gone disc golfing out at Monroeville, and he came home with a rash on his arm. Okay, whatever, that happens. It's whatever. It was a good-sized rash, but it wasn't easily identifiable. There was a scratch in it. So Rachel got out, all the different poison ivy stuff and whatever else, and that was Saturday he played. Sunday he played. So then today she checks on it again, and he's like, it's fine. But it had like a ton of tiny little raised bumps on it. But I mean, almost microscopic. And so she's like, you should go to urgent care. And I'm like, he should not go to urgent care. And so we had that moment. And he's like, Mom, do you want me to go to urgent care? I'll go to urgent care. So he gets up and he leaves. Well, now I, as the husband, I turn to her and I say, honey, you didn't want him to work at Mohan's. You didn't want Bella to work at Mohan's. And I kind of overrode your decision on those. So here, I let you take the lead. If it's more important to you that he goes, he goes. See, I'm being a great husband. She goes, why don't you think he should go? I said, no. I'm not arguing with you. I'm acquiescing.
Yeah.
You take the lead on this one. She's like, well, I'm not arguing either. I just don't understand why you don't want him to go. And I said, well, it says 2 to 4 weeks. And if it's not causing pain, whatever else. She's like, but don't you see that? I'm like, I don't know why we're arguing. So I'm in the kitchen and I thought, oh, I got it. Here's the revelation. I was trying to pay her security debt because she's worried about her son and she's worried that I don't agree with her. So she has a need for security that I'm not meeting. I tried to pay her with respect dollars because I'm saying, hey, honey, look, I'm deferring to you. I am going to give you the respect of the decision maker in this process. She didn't want that.
No, she said, you are giving me Schrute bucks right now.
Yeah.
These are worthless.
Exactly. And then it gets even trickier. So then that doesn't satiate her security debt.
Right.
So then she didn't appreciate
Right.
my donation of respect dollars. So now I'm not appreciated. And I was like, wow, that happened so quickly. And I'm, again, so grateful that I can figure that out. And I went right back in the living room and I explained it to her. And she was like, that's exactly what happened. And we okay? All right, we're okay. All right, fine, good, whatever. And we moved on. And I went, how does anybody who is not obsessed with this have a chance? Because that's all I think of, not all I think about, but I think about this all the time. And whenever there's a conflict, I go, okay, well, what happened in the conflict? And I have to break it down
Right.
and put it over.
So did Joe go to urgent care?
What are you, my wife? He got there at like 20 to 8. They closed at 8 and they said, we'll see you at 8 a.m. tomorrow. So on the one hand, they didn't rush him into surgery.
Right. It's not urgent.
Or put an IV into him right away. But on the other hand, they did say
do
come
want
back.
him back.
Yeah.
But that's a nice solid copay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, relational needs or disc golf, which do you think of more?
You mean Jesus?
No, I didn't say
That's
Jesus.
the most.
Okay, all right. 'Cause-
Idle time, 100% disc golf.
Yeah.
But in any interaction with anybody, it's that kind of stuff.
Right. I was going to ask Mike, you alluded to being in an airplane and puking and like the kaleidoscope imagery is fantastic. I'm really glad that you said that. But can you describe more about what you like? Were you Goose in Top Gun? Like the navigator? Like what's your job?
I was a started off as a student, like we all do, and the process was actually pretty slick. It's determined, what course you're gonna. Is it going to remain? Everybody starts in fixed wing turboprop aircraft. The first selection that they make is who goes to rotary wing aircraft to fly helicopters, and then once you're in that pipeline, all the variations of helicopters, who stays in fixed wing aircraft. So I stayed in fixed wing aircraft, went to jets, and then ended up as a a bombardier navigator on A6 Intruders. It's long been decommissioned, but it was a two-man aircraft. Interestingly enough, it's one of the few in the inventory where the crew sat side by side instead of front to back, which is actually kind of
So
cool.
what's the purpose of that plane?
It was an all-weather medium attack aircraft, carrier-based. So we'd launch from aircraft carriers, which means you could basically go anywhere in the world, and carried for a small aircraft, it carried an extremely heavy payload. I think at the time was like second only to the B-52.
Wow. Oh, wow.
So for a small aircraft, it was carrier-based and mobile. Now the downside was it was the airframe was Vietnam era.
Okay.
We were the A6E, so the fifth iteration of avionics, weapons delivery systems, ground mapping radar, forward-looking infrared. So it was sophisticated in that regard, but it was still subsonic, and it had no guns. It had no defensive capability.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was something that...
Except for the payload. And if that goes up.
I mean, if you're getting chased by anybody, the best defense we had was we could fly very stable at low altitude.
Okay.
So we would essentially get really low, and that would negate
Some radar.
Yeah, radar tracking, but
That's wild.
It was
But you didn't have escorts with like, hey, this plane has zero defense except for under the radar.
Well, usually on a strike package, you'd have the intruders, you would have the aircraft that the A7 Corsair, and it again depends on what time. So for us, it was all intruders. The A7s were a little bit older, but you would also fly with EA-6B Prowlers, so virtually the same aircraft frame, only it was 4 seats instead of 2. It was a pilot and 3 electronic warfare officers, so they would provide all the jamming capability to kind of keep the strike package hidden. But one of the downsides, was great, our defense is going low, and then you're subject to small arms fire from the ground,
Right.
because you're not bulletproof either.
Right.
So you're like, there's actually it was a great book. It was called Flight of the Intruder, and it was about the Vietnam War, and it was about an intruder squadron, during that, and it was a movie. Actually, kind of neat. I had just finished flight school, and I had not yet reported to the fleet for the replacement air group, but I already knew, that I was going to be flying intruders, and the movie premiered. So for 6 months, and this is kind of a part of a longer story, but for 6 months, I was able to come back home to the Federal Building. I finished my training in Pensacola. I got my wings. my start date for the fleet was 6 months down the road. The Gulf War was on the horizon, hadn't yet started, but everybody kind of knew it was coming. So I had 6 months, and a mentor of mine took me aside and he said, "Listen," he said, "here's what's going to happen. If you report to the fleet squadron early, your class start date isn't for 6 months. You're going to get stuck in an office, and as a junior officer, you're going to do someone else's busy work. If you stay here at the school's command, same thing is going to happen to you. You're going to get stuck in an office doing someone else's work." He said, "You're from Pittsburgh, right?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "That's a very big district. They do what's called OHARP, Officer Hometown Recruiting Program. They bring young officers, newly commissioned, like the younger the better."
So you weren't enlisted, you were an officer.
Correct, yes. So they bring them back to the district to help with the recruiting initiative because let's say they have a job fair to go to or a career day at a college. They like to have familiar. I mean, you might have graduated from that college, so you'll go and you'll be like hey, can I? Yeah, sure. This is, and with your, the warfare specialties. Well, this one's aviation. This one's surface warfare. These guys are going wherever they're going. So that was not a bad deal for a young man, to be able to come back home for 6 months. But it was an incredible experience. I mean, it really was. But during that time, we get notified at the district. They said, "Hey, Flight of the Intruder is about to be released." And what do they call it when they limited release?
Oh, limited.
Like a limited release. So they were like, "Hey, we'd like to get as many of you to the theater as possible to give it like some feedback." And sure enough, as they're talking, one of my colleagues, I guess one of my peers, was like, "Hey, isn't that what you fly?" And I'm like, "Well, it will be." Like, I've never flown that yet. I mean, in the training command, my pipeline, we did T-34 turboprops, then T-2C Buckeyes. It was our first jet. We actually got some time in the A4, which was awesome. That's a fantastic jet. It's like a little sports car.
I've liked it.
It was a lot of fun. And then we had some training. It was all basically hands off. It was in a Cessna Citation, which is like the Cessna version of the Learjet. And that was for to learn the ground mapping radar. And picture this, like safety of flight, right? I don't know how to work radar. I don't know how to work infrared. I can't fly and do that at the same time. So what they did was they had a retired Navy contractor fly the aircraft. I would sit in the co-pilot seat where all my gear was. And, you'd work the radar, you'd work the FLIR, the forward-looking infrared. And the instructor pilot would sit in a pull-out seat right between the two of you and literally like look over your shoulder and watch how you're tuning your scope and all that. So had a lot of variety. I'd never been in the Intruder yet. We'd get there, when your first day you check in, you do your ground school, and here's your fleet aircraft. And I'm like, I'll be flying Intruders. The guy's like, yeah, that's good. Come on, you're gonna sit here. And I took my dad. It was actually very cool. Took my dad to see the movie, and that was fun.
So how do you get to that age how old at that point?
I was 25.
Okay, so go back to how does Mike Pietragallo get there? Like, what was 0 to 18 like?
Oh man,
I know that's 18 years, but pick some highlights of how does Mike Pietragallo end up being an officer in the Army?
Sure, he didn't. I was in the Navy.
Sorry, Navy.
That's all right. Sorry. I love you, man. You're like my brother, so I'll let that slide.
Wow.
Jay just got up and walked away.
I'm sorry.
No, he's sorry.
But listen, everybody does that.
That would be called disrespect.
So tell me about the Coast Guard again.
Right. Well, close.
Homeland Security.
PennDOT.
PennDOT.
I was part of that crew that paged the lines. You remember? Listen, this is a tangent. I'm going to go on this tangent because I wanted to throat punch somebody when this happened. Do you remember when PennDOT used to paint lines and they would send a truck out and lay cones so that you were relatively safe from the lines?
Yeah.
Well, I guess some bean counter somewhere figured, well, that takes money and time. We're not going to do that
We can just let people drive over.
Yeah,
right?
Get it on their car.
So my wife calls me, and I love my wife dearly.
Lovely lady.
Dearly. I mean, I'm not just out of fear. Am I saying this? I love her. You remember that series, Vikings?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I never watched
Didn't
it.
watch it.
Didn't watch it? You remember?
Yeah.
Then you might not remember Lagertha. Oh, that's my wife.
Oh.
That's my wife. Gorgeous, blonde, and will will hurt you.
Yeah.
But anyway, so she calls me up one day, and I'm like, "Hey, sweetheart." She goes, "I got your truck washed."
Oh no!
And I'm like, "Why?
Oh man.
Like, why would you get
this
my
the
truck
Hummer?
washed?" Oh no, this was the one I have now.
Oh, okay.
I was like, "Why?"
Black.
Yeah, yeah. It looked like some like modern like Pittsburgh Steeler like tailgate.
Yeah, a
vehicle,
mosaic.
you know?
Yeah.
But I guess what happened was they were on Freeport Road, headed up to the Pittsburgh Mills Mall. I'd heard that they're going to do Night of the Living Dead 4 up there now.
Are you being
it's-
serious? Or
no.
just because there's no
It's
stores
like
there?
a zombie mall.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Because Century 3 is demolished.
it's a shame though. It's a shame because when it
was a
first
cool
opened,
place.
it was all right.
It reminded me of the malls of our youth.
Right.
Speaking of your youth,
Yes, I'm sorry. Back yes, I got it. I got it. All right. So I grew up a poor sharecropper.
I thought you were going to go with a poor black child. You probably just avoided that, didn't you? I saw you edit it right in your head. Go ahead. Poor
Anyway,
sharecropper. At the age of 8, you became white.
Grew up normal. I mean, it's like the 60s and everything. And I swear, I mean, I was, I guess I would say a normal kid. I mean, I grew up on, John Wayne movies and cowboy movies and
America.
G.I. Joe action figures.
Nice.
You know? And it's kind of funny. It's uncanny, right? I had, I think most kids, it was my first birthday. There's a picture of me somewhere in our family album. It's my birthday cake, and it's got, I love my mom, but it was like a ship. There's a ship on the birthday cake, and I'm sitting on the table in that little blue sailor's suit, like with the bib and the tie like that. And that was cool.
And a little bit, maybe.
Like
foreshadowing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So,
Where? What township?
I grew up right in Pittsburgh. I was born in, we lived in Highland Park,
Okay.
and I grew up in Stanton Heights.
All right.
It's like right between Bloomfield, Garfield.
Yeah.
But and it's strange too because I just recently said this not too long ago in regard to kind of like the global political climate right now. When we moved to Stanton Heights, we were the second non-Jewish family.
Really?
Oh yeah. It was a very large Jewish population in Stanton Heights, and I've never used this word before ever, but idyllic. I said is in regard to my childhood. I remember Sunnyside Elementary School. It's right on Stanton Avenue, like 3 blocks away from my house. And our neighbors, there's only one other Catholic family on the street, so Christmas time we would decorate. And the biggest kick was, a lot of our neighbors were like, "Oh wow, like it's kind of neat."
That's fun.
They didn't do that, but there was just such a such a community spirit.
Yeah.
I mean, and I remember thinking this, and I just again, it's strange that we're talking about it again, but just a couple of weeks ago, I was in a conversation, and I said, I didn't really think about it back then. We didn't have to, but U.S. Steel, Alcoa, they were big employers at the time. So as a result, a lot of my classmates were, Carl. I don't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday.
All right.
But I remember these names like it was, Carl Cho was a classmate of mine. His father, that was from South Korea. He was an engineer. He's over here on a 12-month or whatever, for U.S. Steel. Javier Guzman, from Argentina. His parents are here. And, my Little League baseball teams, my Cub Scout troop, I mean, there was just, you didn't have to be told to include people, right? Who you just did, And
you were more identified for being from Stanton Heights,
Right.
or Sunnyside than you were, he's from Argentina, he's from
absolutely.
this. Right.
Absolutely. And no one really, and I think too, one of the things that I enjoyed very much, and maybe I'd like to think was, formed me into, what the adult I became, I think was through things like art class and music class. You'd learn about each other's cultures, right? Through songs and through, art. And, when you do that, and there's, I don't know, there are a few things, and maybe I'm just too old now at this point, but I look at it and I think to myself, I don't believe a person should get credit for being inclusive. I think you should get a smack if you're not.
That's a great point.
Right. And I don't.
It should be the given.
Right.
The default.
Right. And strangely enough, I mean, through the CrossFit community, I mean, no one ever had to tell us to be welcoming. No one ever had to tell us to, it was just a default measure, right? That's how it is. It's how we were raised. It's part of being polite. And I remember not too long ago, I mean, jumping from how I grew up to this, but not too long ago, my wife's like, "Oh, by the way, So I think this is going to be like, get milk on your way home.
Or I got your car washed again.
Yeah. I got you.
Again?
Stop, dude. Next time, just pull over. Just pull over and wait. So she said, oh, so evidently we're very popular in the LGBTQ community. And I went, well, like you and me?
Yeah, we the Pietragallos.
I said, okay. I said, well, no. She's like, no, like the gym. And I remember for a moment, I was like, well, okay. I'm like, well, how'd that come up? How do you know that? And she said, well, we have quite a few members. And she said, I guess in a conversation, they went out for every so often, like I never get invited. I have to go figure. But every so often, folks after a workout, especially the later morning workout, they'll go out for a coffee or something, I guess in normal conversation, one of our members shared that. And she said, you are very well regarded in our community. And my wife was like, oh, well, that's nice, for being inclusive. And again, I have to tell you, it kind of blindsided me. And that was my reaction. I was like, okay, I mean, that's nice to know. But again, my first reaction was, it kind of makes me feel uncomfortable to be, you're getting kudos for something that you should do anyway.
And I don't want it to look like I'm trying.
Right.
I'm just being a normal person.
Right.
The kind
You're
of
just treating other people how you want to be treated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What?
And I
That's
think
crazy.
it's a sad state of affairs.
I know.
Yeah.
Something. Wait. We should call that something.
Yeah.
Why don't we
Some
call
kind
it
of
the golden
silver
rule?
rule. Oh, the golden
Right?
rule. There you go.
I mean, to me that was just. But then I did kind of like digest it, and I went, well, it's kind of sad, right? It's kind of sad when you think like, well, shouldn't everybody be? And let's not put, don't shine a light on, doing what you ought to do. You
Right.
know? So I don't know, but.
I have a question about, well, maybe more of a comment or a discussion point. You're flying these.
You just take me right out of getting him into 0 to 18 back into the plane.
Yeah.
Okay, because we were going to head on to high school next.
Oh, okay. Well, I wanted to talk about security though.
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay, so back on track. So
Yeah.
we grew up in this neighborhood.
Sorry.
I would not have traded my childhood for anything or traded with anyone. I thought it was fantastic. And
And this is 60s, 70s.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So now, get up into, junior high, and Sunnyside didn't go all the way to 8th grade. I don't recall where it would have dropped off, but it didn't go all the way to 8th grade. So every male member of my family went to Central Catholic High School. The day I was born, my mother's like, he's going to Central Catholic. Okay, great. So what ended up happening was junior high, Sunnyside didn't have one. So I went to St. Raphael's in Morningside. And, it's kind of interesting, too. Now, none of these places are really even there anymore.
Right.
And the buildings are there, but, they've been...
It's a brewery or a coffee shop.
Yeah, they've been downsized or, But anyway, so I went there. Now, still played baseball, with the guys I grew up with. Off to Central Catholic, when a lot of my classmates from grade school, Peabody High School, Taylor Alderdice. And what was really kind of cool, though, was when I went to Pitt, freshman year, who do I run into but this big group of classmates of mine that I'd gone to elementary school with. And it was almost like no time had passed. So that was kind of fun. It was kind of nice. So Central Catholic, again, the 4 years there, I would not have traded for anything. I wouldn't. And, again, you get a little bit of a different, you go from your little neighborhood, and then all of a sudden you're at Central Catholic, which is a city, it's still in the city. It's in Oakland. I remember I likened it to Frogger. You get off a bus, on Fifth Avenue on the opposite side. And you're like,
Yeah.
all right, that's your first test. You want to be one of us? You got to get to the front door. Right. So I would not have traded that experience. Worked hard academically, and but I still had fun. I was still that like a little bit like I knew how to play the crease. And I went and had no real intentions of anything other than law school at that point. I thought, my one of my cousins is a fantastic lawyer, fantastic. And again, lessons you learn as a young man, right? You see these guys all over TV, there's no fee and we get money and all this kind of stuff. And I remember when I was a kid, I said to my father once, I was like, hey, why doesn't Bill advertise? He's a lawyer, why doesn't Bill advertise? And my dad he was an interesting man. He was a very interesting man. I'll share this in reference to your colleague on Long Island there, right? So my dad wasn't a made guy, but he was. Do you remember a place? It's actually not too far from here. Tagano's.
Oh yeah,
I think
Frank.
it's a drugstore now.
Yeah, Frank.
Right?
Close.
It's like a Rite Aid now.
It's Walgreens.
Walgreens, yeah. So there and the Eastwood Inn. Mm-hmm. Okay. As a kid growing up, I didn't connect the dots till later. Every first Holy Communion, every confirmation, most birthdays, you'd have it at one or the other, right? Mm-hmm. And always run into friends of my dad, right? So it's cool because this is Mr. So-and-so, this is Mr. So-and-so, and it's all good stuff, you know. And I will say this, it was a time, it was an era. Mm-hmm. Everybody dressed sharp.
Mm-hmm. Everybody wore a suit.
Right. Crisp, you know, presentable. So, and anyway, that's when I was a kid. As I got to be older, you start to realize, you're like, hey, you know what? Like, the Village Inn was the place, not the Village Inn, the Eastwood Inn was the place to go, like, it's somebody's birthday, somebody's communion, whatever. As I started dating and driving, you're like, hey, you can go to Pizza Hut, but if you really want to make an impression on a young lady, you take her to Tagano's, right? About that same time now, after high school, I wrestled in high school. That was my sport. I played a lot of baseball when I was younger. I got to high school. I was like, no, I mean, I just was drawn to wrestling, you know. And that led me in college. I started boxing. So now I find out, and again, I didn't notice at the time. Going to these fights, my dad's always there, you know, with his friends, and my mom, she was character too. But I start to meet these guys. And my dad's like addressing them by their nicknames, right? And they're like, hey, that's a good fight. You know, and then they're like messing with each other, like, hey, he didn't learn that from you. You know, like this and that, right? So as you start, a little bit more, one tournament turns to another, and you see the same faces and this. And every once in a while, and the first time this happened, I was like, wow, this is so cool. Went to Tagano's with a young lady. And I run into a couple of the guys that I had met through my dad. Mm-hmm. And a couple of them I didn't recognize, two that I did. And I was like, hey, Mr. So-and-so. Nice to see you. He goes, hey, you're Al's kid, right? And I was like, yes, sir. And me at that age and that mindset, right? I mean, I thought I was a tough guy. Like I wanted to be as tough as my dad, And my dad was just he projected, Mm-hmm. The first time I ever heard this, I was like, whoa. So the guy that yes, sir, I am. He turns to the guys I didn't know, and he's like, let me tell you something. His dad, toughest son of a bitch you ever want to meet. And in that moment, I was like, if these guys think my dad's the toughest guy, I'm like, oh. I thought that was just the coolest. Like, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about him, But
hey, were you a typical kid at this point? A kid, you're 20, whatever years old, that you're still thinking like, I'm gonna take a shot at my dad one of these days.
Oh no!
So that was never even on the radar.
No, listen. One time I thought. Now, bear in mind, all right, and this is amazing. I'm getting emotional here. So, my dad was in construction in some capacity all his life. He's either.
Who do you work for?
Oh God, a lot of the bigger companies, but then largely for himself.
Okay.
Yeah. He would do, and it was neat too because I think I wouldn't know what to call. I guess nowadays if we used like the brewery modality or the coffee shop beanery, it was more like God. I had the word now. It's
Small batch construction.
Exactly. Yeah. No. There you
Well
go.
done, Eric.
I get you.
So he would go into business. And he had a friend who's an extremely talented architect. And they would do these, I'm building a house in Fox Chapel for so-and-so. And it's not a house. It's like a show place, So he did that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like artisan work, like more than just laying concrete.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, once I was I was in elementary school and I came down with like a flu or something over the winter. And I guess, winter shut down a couple jobs, whatnot. So he's at home. He comes up to my room. Late morning. He's got a legal pad in his hand. He sits down on the edge of the bed. He goes, hey, what do you think of that? I'm like, what is it? He's like, it's a book cabinet. What do you think? And I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Should put some books in it, Dad.
Yeah. So he goes down to the garage and I'm like muted, from
Yeah.
like the next day he brings up, the bookshelf he showed me the day before. Like he sketched it out and then he built it. And I'm like, that's cool.
That's
that's
great.
cool.
Now, this is foreshadowing. I just had a regular, at that time I was little. We had just recently moved into this house, and it's like white plaster walls. And I don't remember the design. It wasn't a Cape Cod, I know that. But the design of the interior, the ceiling, was kind of like sloped in one corner and contours and whatnot. But it's just all white plaster. So right around that time, the bookshelf was the catalyst, right? It's like dark stained wood, and I think it's called bottle glass, where like the glass looks like the bottom of bottles, right?
Yeah.
So all of these things he had picked up on different jobs or didn't use, on jobs. So he builds that, and it had like the bottle glass on top with the two larger doors, and then on the bottom had like solid wood, doors. He proceeds to remodel my room. When it was done, I was just thinking about this not too long ago. I hope we still have photographs of it somewhere. It looked like a pirate ship's captain's cabin.
Oh, that's cool.
Dude. So I think it was like every night sleeping in that room.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool.
I was like,
From the
"Arg."
birthday cake to the bedroom.
Yeah. This kid's
gotta
going to
be.
see.
He's going to see.
It's got to be, right? So, but, in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to go to law. So, I forget, but then I remember.
It's you can climb out of any rabbit hole you walk down.
So, again, getting back to my cousin, I said, Dad, all these commercials and these guys. And like, oh, did you slip and fall? Were you bit by a dog? I said, why doesn't Bill advertise? And like the sage wisdom of a gangster, but like more like a Vito, you know what I mean? Corleone, right? My dad goes, tell you what, go get the phone book. I go get the phone book. He finds his name like under attorneys, and he goes, look, one line, the name and the phone number.
He doesn't need to advertise.
Lost. Well, he's got 2 floors in the Oxford Center, right? He is a subject matter expert for airlines, tobacco industry, airline. Like he's had some heavy hitters. Like
Yeah,
I guess
wow.
if this was like Mad Men, it would have been like he's
Yeah.
got Coca-Cola, Lucky Strike, and the GM.
He doesn't
or
need a
something
billboard.
like- no,
They know his
no.
number.
And I've actually seen him. Excuse me. I've actually seen him in court. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, he's. I'd like to think I was very good at my job. That would like I'm watching that and I'm going, wow, like different medium. But and the one time I did see him, I actually felt bad for the opposing counsel. I really did. I was like, oh my god, if this is a fight, they would have called it. They would have called it by now. They'd have been like, ding, 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 throw the towel, boy, throw it all. But
Now, he was older than you.
yes,
Yeah, because it sounded like you were like, y'all going to be.
exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. So my line, my generation, my father had 3 siblings. The oldest was his brother Dan, then my dad, then their younger brother Gene, and then their baby sister Sarah. Right. So Uncle Dan flew B-17s in World War II. Yeah, legit. Shot down.
Wow.
Yeah, shot down over Europe, escaped and evaded, and made it back. And then, strangely enough, he was on his way back in theater after leave. And the story goes, as he's getting on the aircraft, walking up the boarding ladder, up the steps, someone comes out from flight control, and they're like, "Hey, Pietragallo, come get back here, get back here." They're like, you got a call from the Red Cross. Your grandmother just passed away, so he didn't get on the plane. Well, the plane crashed and everyone
my
on board.
goodness.
Yeah, plane crashed and everyone on board was killed. So, just wild. My dad was in Korea, and I think that was one of the wildest things because, again, growing up the way I did, my generation, I'm all about, and the GI Joes were like the 11.5-inch full action figure at
Metal?
the time. No, they were like,
Were
flexible, like plastic, I guess. But like they were legit. Like
The kung fu grip.
you could like change their clothes, like change out of different uniforms.
Okay, yeah.
And this is a more foreshadowing. Thank you, Hasbro. One year for Christmas, I got the GI Joe Navy SEAL with like the wetsuit and the fins and have like a shark,
Yeah.
And I will tell you how that saved my life. I will tell you that story because that's divine, and not for the last time either.
Yeah. Well, sure.
But I remember I was like, oh, this is so cool, So, of course, I'm playing with it. But now, sea, air, and land, right? Sea is only part of it. So in the morning, Christmas morning, we did our waterborne operation. We breached, we got, past the surf zone. Well, then I take the wetsuit off, and I put on, like, some jungle camis, and he's rocking and rolling, Well, then evidently in my mind, like after dinner, it's time to, get back to the ship. Well, I can't get the wetsuit back on. Like I'm little and I can't figure it out. So I go, Dad, I take this naked G.I. Joe and this inside out little wetsuit. And I'm like, Dad, can you put his wetsuit back on? And he's like, buddy, he's like, I thought I asked you, like, don't take it off. Like it's hard to get on in the first place. Well, yeah, but I had to change his uniform. Now he's trying to explain to however old I was at that time. He's like, why don't you do this? You got more than one. Why don't you put the other uniform on? And then I'm trying to tell him, it's not the same guy.
Right.
Sure. Like, Dad, that's not the same guy. Right. In his mind, he's like,
Yeah.
hey, dude, But anyway, so I'm thinking, now my cousin Bill, he's the second oldest grandson. I'm the baby. So there's like 16 years between us. So to me, like, these guys to this day, they're my heroes. His older brother, Lewis, is a renowned oncologist. And, Bill's a fantastic. Their younger brother, Dan, was he was actually a talent agent in Hollywood. Yeah. You remember I was just one of them. Like he had some big names, but as a kid, right? Remember Starsky and Hutch?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were his clients.
Nice.
And at that point, I was in like junior high, so I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that is so cool, But so yeah, looking up to those guys, my whole life, and I thought, I'm going to be an attorney. I'm going to be an attorney. That's going to be great. And all through high school, national honor. I mean, I worked hard. I guess I'd turn it on when I needed to. Got really good grades. I got accepted to every college I applied to, but I chose Pitt. I guess ultimately, staying close to home was
right down the road
great.
from Central Catholic.
Exactly. So now, unfortunately, and I wouldn't have traded Central Catholic for anything in the world. I think, philosophically, I look at it and I go, at that time, having an all-male student body, I think it eliminated a lot of potential problems, a lot of potential grief. I mean, you don't posture like you might in front of the fairer sex, that type of thing. But at the same time, back then, it wasn't Oakland Catholic. It was St. Paul's Cathedral was right down the street. Sacred Heart was in Shadyside, Divine Providence Academy, Ursuline Academy, Mount Alvernia. I mean, we were like the Spartans, right? And we were surrounded by all these, like, the Persians, if you will. Only the Persians wore pleated skirts and they were hot. So that was
No disrespect to current Persians.
no. Well, hang on.
Still.
I can't rush to judgment on that. But anyway,
Hang on.
I'm just saying. There's still, as far as I know, there's still a live bounty out on me. So I might want to mention that before I.
What are the odds of it happening tonight here?
Yeah, right. And listen,
I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it.
I digress. So got to Pitt, and I was about the fifth time I think I've said the word foreshadowing. Right. Back then, you had to do everything in person. There was no internet.
Right.
There was no. I
No
registered
Zoom,
online.
no Zoom calls.
No,
Yeah.
drop an ad was a nightmare.
Right. I have to do this in person. So I get there for my first day of registration. And it took me like maybe 2 stops to realize I'm in this long line. And they're all general ed classes at that time. So I'm like, okay, if you're alphabetically, if your name's this, stand here and this and this. So I hear, hi. I turn around and there's this adorable little blonde girl behind me. I mean, super cute. Now, I will say this with all honesty and full disclosure. I can say this out loud because at the time my wife was, she's like 11 years younger than me. So that's like amnesty, right? She was just a kid, so we didn't even know each other back then. So I could talk about the blonde I met in line at registration at the University of Pittsburgh without any fear of, retribution. So, hi, we're making small talk. Oh, where are you from? Well, I'm from wherever. Great. So I get up, and because I'm a gentleman, as I'm about to walk up and do my thing, I turn around and I go, well, it was nice chatting with you. And off I go. So at the next building, I'm in line. Hi, well, who's behind me again, right? I'm like, it's okay. It took 2 more stops to click. I'm like, oh, this is part of a process. We're going to the same. So by the time we get done and we're all registered, she's like, so hey, do you want to go get a Coke? And I was like, yes, I do. And that set the tone for like the next 4 years because all I had to, pretty girl flashes me a smile. I'm going to go get a coffee. I'm not going to class. you know? So now I joke with my kids now because every one of them has made Dean's List. I got 2 college graduates, and my son just finished his freshman year, and they're like, hey, Dad, I made Dean's List again. I'm like, right on. I'm like, you know, I made the Dean's List when I was in college too. Not that one. I think my list was more called academic probation.
It was a list.
It was a list. And
That the dean put together.
It came from the dean's
Yeah.
office of the dean. You are on academic probation. I'm like, yeah, and you got bushy eyebrows, so I can study harder. That's going to stay with you forever. So, so probably sophomore year. Now, my dad, I said, was a Korean War veteran. And one thing I do remember was I had a lot of friends, and honest to God, you know me well. I don't mean any disrespect by this at all, but I think it's all perspective, and I didn't understand it at the time. So a lot of my friends whose fathers were military service members, they would, throughout grade school, junior high, they'd come in with like memorabilia. Oh yeah, my dad had this patch, and these pictures, and this, and it's all great. My dad didn't have any of that stuff, none of it. And when I would talk to him about it, or I'd be all jazzed up about like a good movie that we just saw or something, I go, hey, Dad, when you were in the Army, like, hey, Dad, what was it? He's like, champ. But you know what else was cool, though, was he wasn't like, because I've known too many guys like this, I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
The guy that tells you I don't want to talk about it like that, he really wants to talk about it, and not in a therapeutic way. He just wants you to ask him more so he can like, well, I'm not supposed to tell you. Then don't. That's a simple answer. You're not supposed to tell me. You probably
Don't make a big deal out of it.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't. But my dad was just so like detached. And as I got older, he'd be like, champ, he's like, you're fascinated with this. He's like, I was drafted. And I go, yeah, but, and now again, like I was a student enough and old enough to realize, I was like, Dad, you were drafted, guys in Vietnam were drafted, but, not everybody served, but you did. He was like, champ, that's how it was. That's, only when I got older and I started my career. Now, I will tell you this. The day I came home and I said, hey, Dad, I'm not going to go to law school. What? I said, no, I think I'm going to join the Navy. Oh, my God. I never. He
didn't embrace you with a big hug.
No, God, no, not at all. He flipped out.
How'd that feel?
Horrible.
In what way? Was it scary? Was it disappointing?
Disappointing because, here was a guy that was my hero.
Yeah.
Still is. But as a father now, I realize this. That was that kind of father's fear come true.
Yeah.
He's like...
especially given what he's gone through.
Right.
But see, this is a great example of what sort of we talk about here at the table, which we never did thank people. By the way, let's do that before we get to the end. But that... people always say, oh, my parents, they did the best they could. And your dad did. And you can see why a guy that gets, drafted to go fight in the Korean War, which is no popular war, as compared to there were popular wars. You can see why he was that way. But still, as a 22-year-old or 21-year-old, you're like, crap, it's still, I'm sure you can feel it to this day. Like I can feel it listening to you say it. We all went, so he didn't embrace it.
No, not at all. And in fact, it was like, sometimes I think, in the heat of the moment, things come out.
Sure.
And you're like, well, dude, you can't get that genie back in the bottle, But in hindsight, and based on his, his actions after I started the process and, after I was gone, it was all he talked about. It was all he talked about. And I think it was out of fear, And I'll share this with you. I never said this to anybody out loud, but I'll say it loud and clear now. This did not make its way into my Memorial Day speech on Monday. I think about this a lot. My son's 19 years old, and on his 18th birthday, we registered for the Selective Service, like you still do. And I said, okay. And I said, buddy, let me ask you, just hypothetically, man. I said, now, the Selective Service is what it is. And I said, but I'd be hard-pressed to believe there will ever be another draft.
Sure.
They don't work. Conscript soldiers anywhere in the world is it's not the way to go. That'll be your point of failure, And I said, but if something did happen,
which doesn't inherently mean they won't try it. Actually, that's
right. What am I?
You're going with common sense and strategy. Strange.
I refuse to believe. No, well, you better. But I said, let's say something happened of like epic global proportion, And there was no doubt. I said, what do you think you would do? And he thought about it real quick. And I said, well, you think he'd go, like Navy or, what do you think? I said, because I'll tell you, I think he'd be a hell of an aviator. I mean, just he's first of all, he's smart as anything. He's capable. And, I said, what do you think? And he goes, I think I'd rather do what you did. And I'm like, which time,
Right.
Which time? But he was referring to the agency, and I was like, huh? I was like, well, that I can help you with, but, and so I say that, but the point that I'm making is this, and this is just how it is, there's no measure for how much I love my country. I think I've proven that more than once. My war was over. The Gulf War came and went. I separated from active duty in the mid-'90s. Stayed in the Naval Reserves. But the job that I had, I was not active in the reserves because I was traveling all the time. I got hired by a company out of Northern Virginia, and I did executive protection. So, I worked the Saudi royal family quite a bit. Matter of fact, fun story. At the time, one of the biggest clients that I ever worked for the firm was, he was governor of Riyadh at the time. And it was Prince Salman at the time. Now he's the king. Oh. Right? Yeah. And we just saw a couple years ago, I guess maybe right after COVID, there was a special on the royal family and how they were kind of changing, like more progressive, more equity, with women's rights and things like this. And one of the they flashed the name on the screen and they're like, Princess Rima bint Sultan. And my wife goes, and she looks at me and she was like, guys, to our kids, she goes, guys, when she was a little girl, she was like a toddler. She's like, your daddy was her bodyguard. And the kids are like, whoa, And I will tell you that particular branch of the family, they were awesome. They were absolutely awesome.
Do you call him up now and go, what's up, King?
Right? I was like, hey, listen, I'm your guy.
Hey, what kind of present do you send?
I'm your guy. But no, we had, and when his granddaughter, I was her bodyguard, but prior to that, I was bodyguard for his daughter. And she was a wonderful young lady. She really was. And we took a trip from Pittsburgh to New York City. And it was a Sunday afternoon. And they all have like people that, like their right hand, person. Mm-hmm. So this Lebanese girl, I'll never forget her. She pops in, knocks on the door in the command. The command post was a suite at the, where were we? The Palace Hotel in New York City. So we would take the suite, the door would remain open. They would remove any of leave the sitting furniture, but take out the beds, big desk, and we would put remote cameras in the hallways. And actually at the time, I don't believe they were remote. I think we hardwired them.
Hardwired, yeah. But
they were portable, mobile. And we set it up like a Secret Service detail, So, oh, Mike, yes, Hassa would like to go shopping. And I was like, okay, I'll call the driver. I get the driver. He's waiting for us downstairs. Boom, off we go. And I think we went to Barney's an hour before closing time on a Sunday. Great. So she's just picking clothes and boom, 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 boom. And at one point, one of the salespeople, I'm just walking around. Like right now, I'm like kind of bored. And the store's virtually empty. Yeah. So I'm walking around, I'm doing my job, and I keep in touch over the radio with our driver because the bags of clothing, as they're being bagged up, they had extra staff stay behind, and they're like, okay, these two ladies are going to run these bags down. There's a town car outside the front door. So I'm like, hey, two more coming down. Oh, copy, two more coming down. So now I work my way up. Mia, I think was the girl's name, the Lebanese girl. I make my way up behind her, and I'm just, walking. Well, she doesn't know I'm behind her. So now the salesman comes out, and he says, how the heck did he say it to one of the other girls? It was like she had two girls with her that day, Mia and a British girl. So the salesman says to the British girl something about, well, now I told her man, I told her man that we'd be doing this, and I think I'm being funny, but I don't realize, like, I'm not small, so I thought Mia heard me coming up behind her. Evidently she didn't. So when the salesman says to the other girl, whose name escapes me, my apologies, she says, I told her man to do X, Y, and Z. So I lean to Mia's ear and I go, I prefer faithful manservant Drago. But as soon as I started, like I didn't want to say it loud because I didn't want anybody to hear.
Yeah.
Well, evidently I was a little too close and the whisper was a little too creepy. I go, I prefer. She's like, oh! So she startles, right? And I'm like, whoa, what? But I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, great family. I mean, honestly, great family. But so that was right after the Gulf War. I did that private sector. I was actually in Northern Virginia. Alexandra, our oldest daughter, was born in May of 2000.
In Alexandria, Virginia?
No.
Oh.
No, in Oakmont, Pennsylvania.
Oh.
Yeah. Alexandra, named after my dad. So his name was Alexander.
Yeah, so I had to be tough.
Yeah, he always told me, he was like, I get stuck with a name like Alexandra.
Yeah.
I wanted something more masculine like Sally. But yeah, Alex. Now, interesting, his name was Alexander. He hated it because he thought Alexander Pietragallo just sounded too long. Right? All his boys called him Alex. Alex, hey, you Alex boy. Yes, sir. Anyway, so our daughter was just like 1 year old, a little toddler, and I was in Northern Virginia on September 11th. I was working a job down there, and we had been out all night the night before with this knucklehead. He was the kind of guy that sometimes you get an assignment and you're like, man, that's odd. Like, I don't know why this guy would need a bodyguard. And then you find out it's like shareholders or something like that. This guy, first meeting, I was like, oh, I know why this guy needs
Everybody
a bodyguard.
wants to kill him.
I think I'm going to kill him myself.
Yeah.
But we were out all night, and he was an ass. And I think more so probably because of us. Like I think he felt like he could kind of do what he wanted. So more than a couple times we're like, dude, listen, don't do that again. It's time to go. We got back to the apartment complex they had us staying in, and I remember thinking, I was like, well, this guy's a drunk, and he's going to be out all day tomorrow. And if he's not, I don't care. I mean, we've been out all night. I'm going to turn off my phone, and I'll turn it on when I'm up. So, got to bed in the wee hours of the morning, woke up. And you remember the old Motorola Razr, little flip phone?
It's one of my favorites.
Dude, we thought we were cool because we had the newest,
Yeah.
real
thin.
Star Trek.
Yeah.
You know, like the original.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so I get up, I turn my phone on, I start the coffee pot, and when it lights up, I see or maybe I didn't have it off, maybe I had it muted, but I remembered when I finally looked at it, I had so many missed calls, right? And I'm like, oh man, I hope everybody's okay. What is it? My parents? Is it my daughter? Is it my wife? So and again, uncanny. So coffee's done. I grab my first coffee. I have my phone. I sit down. I mean, the TV's right here. I sit, I hit dial, and I pick up the remote all at the same time, right? My wife answers the phone, and she's like, hey, where are you? And I'm like, in my apartment. I said, we were out late. I said, I had my phone off. Well, now the TV comes on, and all you see is, the replay, right? And she was like, oh, my God. She's like, we couldn't get a hold of you. We were so worried.
Was the Pentagon hit by that point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, by that time, it was all over. It was all over. So I was like, no, I'm fine. And I didn't say I'm fine. I said, no, I'm here. I'm here. And I'm watching this. And then she says, and I remember she said, are you okay? And I'm just staring at the television. I'm like, no, I'm not.
Right.
And I said, listen, you all right? And she said, yeah. I said, okay, let me call you back. So I hung up. The first call I made, I called the Navy offices in Pittsburgh. But that's where I had processed through the first time, when I did enter the Navy. And that to kind of, flip back here for a second. When my dad finally kind of saw, my motivation, and it was interesting too. And I know it's all out of a place of love. When I started boxing, my dad's like, it's not like it is in the movies, right? And I'm like, yes, I can imagine. I know. And he's like, Champ, why do you want to do that? I'm like, I don't know why. It's something I want to try. Like, why did I want to wrestle? Why did I want to, I don't know. So, but again, like he had reservations, but he never missed a fight, ringside every time.
Yeah.
And I think that was it. I think it's all motivated by, not a fear, not.
No, for me, just observing your story, it was a security thing. I'm sure for him, he always wanted to provide for the family and make sure you were okay. Now here you are going and doing things that'll make you less okay,
right?
Which goes against his need for security and your need for respect of Dad. Look what I'm doing.
You know what? one of my best fights. One of my best fights. And I mean, I gauge best by the outcome. No. Not by the win or the loss, but by the outcome, the performance, right?
Sure, the challenge before you.
Yeah. And this was absolutely one of my best because I thought more than once during this fight, I was like, oh man, this guy's like, there's no way. I remember this guy had me backed up so far, and I just, the next thing you know, I feel and this was, I never felt this before, but I'm just backing up, and he's just throwing, and I feel the ring ropes on my back. And I'm like, and now he's just right in front of me, and he's just banging. And I remember thinking, I'm like, this is it. Like I lost this one. Like he's going to land one, and I'm just done. And I tried to get this across to my son. I'm like, you can do more than one thing at a time, right? So I'm thinking that. I'm actually thinking, like, it's over. Any minute now, he's going to land that shot. But as I'm thinking it, I'm still doing my thing. And I remember I slipped out. I slipped under into my right. And I just came up and caught him right on the side of his face with a tight right hook. And he's just done.
And that's such a great testimony too. Like somebody watching that is like, man, Mike Pietragallo, he's bad. Look, he knew that. They didn't know that in your mind you were like, I'm gonna die. This is it. This is the one. And you watch him go down, and you go, oh.
I never shared that with anybody. But again, at 60, I can say it with pride because I think it's a learning point.
Sure.
And
a teaching point for others.
Yeah.
Except
18,
they don't listen.
19, 20, however old I was at that. No way. Because I wanted exactly what you said.
Which brings me to my next point. Mike is very adept at dodging lots of things. Very slippery man. As you all know at the table, and thank you so much for Mary Lynn, for Ashley, for breaking 60, and now breaking 90.
He broke 60 and went all the way to 90.
Yeah, he did. For
an extra 30.
For sitting at the head of the table, and for Bethany Jaworski being the newest member to sit at the head of the table by going to lunchtimeinrome.com and becoming a paid subscriber. You help make this podcast possible. We are grateful for that. You are first in line for all of the great perks. That's probably where Chris is tonight.
Yeah.
He's working on the merch.
He is, right.
I'm sure he is.
It's in the works.
But Mike is so good at eluding things. And as you know, who you sit with us at the table every week, we have our relational needs questionnaire. And Mike was like, this is the silliest, most trivial attempt at trying to get inside my head. So he doctored the entire test and came back inconclusive beyond belief. But Mike, as I've known you for years, and these guys have gotten to know you, I would say there are 3 emotional needs which are the highest in your list. And to me, it would be, and Brian, you brought it up an hour ago, and I shamed you for interrupting, security.
I don't feel shame.
Or peace. No, it doesn't, not about it. But like security, you probably have a high need for security. You want to make sure everything is okay, that everything is in order, and that if something happens beyond your control, well, I did everything I could. But number 2, respect. I think if anybody knows Mike Pietragallo, they're like, you don't disrespect Mike Pietragallo.
I would not ever intentionally try to do that.
But wait, you'd be surprised at the number of people who have. I don't know. No, because we could go for 4 hours.
There's been a few, sure.
Wow.
But not breathing anymore, but
Yeah. But I think the third one is the emotional need of belonging. Like for you to be your father's son, that matters. Central Catholic, proud alum. I think you care about
the Navy.
I think he cares about the Navy. I don't know. Proud American. What I want to ask you to do, of those 3, what matters to you the most? So you have belonging, matter. I matter as to I am Jen's husband. That matters. I am a father. That matters.
I belong to the CrossFit community.
Little founding member. Can we say that? Or is that what's the term we use? Because you're like, there's how many right now in the United States or worldwide?
Numbers, probably around 15,000.
Right, and you were number.
When we first opened up, we were like 57,
Wow.
56.
That's crazy.
54. We were 54 when we first opened. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a big CrossFit. So that's belonging. Security is relatively self-describing, and then of course respect. Rank them for me. Rank them. You don't have to go in depth.
I think security is probably at the top. I do. Respect is important, but I'll tell you one thing, and I hope I've learned, because you're right, you're absolutely, and I'll never forget. I had this talk with Rachel when we were in our old, the last building prior to this one. Not my finest moments.
It's right next to a methadone clinic. So there were parking issues.
And now listen, how trivial, right? Right. It's like a Bronx Tale, right? Was that fight actually over a parking space? No, it wasn't. And again, I was in a different place, in my life back then. I was between deployments, and
You know how that is, Eric?
Yeah. Pirate ships,
Hey, listen. I mean, it's crazy because the one thing that I always thought, and I said this once in front of my dear wife, I love her to death, and my kids were probably in their late teens, my girls, and we were talking about PTS, and it was like a benefit that we did for veteran suicide, for PTS and so forth. And I sincerely, I meant this, and I wasn't being flippant or anything. And I said, it is devastating, and it's taking its toll. I mean, when you think that statistically, I think it's 22 veterans a day take their own lives. And I made the comment, and I said, I'm shocked that I don't have it. I mean, honest to God, you didn't hear a pin drop. You heard brake screech. My wife and both of my daughters were like, what?
What do you mean?
And I'm like, what? Well, I mean, truly. And I think, too, maybe you don't want to think about it. You don't want to acknowledge it. But when you think about all the symptoms, heightened irritability, anger, rage, that type of thing. But and I look back at those days and, I just one example kind of sums it all up because this is probably the most flagrant. It's a morning class. I had already been there a little bit earlier with a friend of mine that we were training before the morning class would come in. So 5 a.m. had already come and gone. 9 a.m. is about to start. We were there training. So now it turned over a couple times. It was last like a brewery or something like that. It's right on Negley Run in Washington
Not
Boulevard.
Arboretum Trail, but whatever it was. Acclamation or something.
Yeah, it was like Couch Brewery for a minute. Now, bear in mind this, because this is a fact. When we had it, it was the funkiest, nastiest building you can imagine. It's old. It's very, very old. And the back wall is built right on a hillside that engineers' reports come to find is like an artesian spring in the under the hill. So that water, it was constant moisture, right? It's concrete.
You're right near that big bridge, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, they've found body. Senge was over there.
Okay.
Anyways.
No, that's where they originally were in Verona.
They're on Washington
This is the
Boulevard.
second location
Yeah,
on Washington Boulevard.
but the big bridge on
Senge
Washington
moved over
Boulevard,
there.
yes.
Because
Yeah.
wasn't Senge Graphics?
Senge had to, anyways.
As
yes.
it is.
Yes.
Yeah, fun fact, my son is a good friend with Michael Senge.
Fun fact, they developed a website.
No kidding.
Kind of.
Sort
Small
of.
world.
Kind of.
Small world.
So anyways,
We don't need to revisit that right now.
Speaking of PTSD.
into the back of the
So the one morning,
hillside,
9 o'clock.
So
artesian well.
a class is, but it's nasty. It's a nasty building. But so be it. That was the first, our first shot in the East End, which was where we wanted to be. So super. So one of our original members, very sweet lady, she comes walking through the front door, and the doors are, the doors are glass, and they, push out onto like a front porch kind of, and then you go
Loading
down.
dock, kind of.
Well, yeah. If you come out like those doors, it's like a porch, and then you keep going this way. It's a loading dock that way. Steps right down to the parking lot. Now here's the conundrum. The curb cut for the driveway is right in front of our doors, right? No one drives the speed limit on Washington Boulevard. They just don't.
It's actually legal.
It's like the
It's
Autobahn.
illegal to drive the speed limit.
They're not allowed.
Pittsburgh's
Do you have any
Autobahn.
idea how slow you were going? So anyway, this member of ours walks in, and she's looking distraught. And I just, I'm coming up from the weight room, in the lower level, and I said, "Hey, Taz, you okay?" And she's like, "Some guy just flicked a cigarette at me in the parking lot." And I'm like, "When?" And she said, "Just now." And honest to God, I didn't like go out with like, or even run out. I mean, I'm walking out to see what happened. Now, just as this thing, kind of unwound, what happened was this guy's he's from the clinic, and just to preface, I have no issue with that whatsoever. I don't care if it's Starbucks. I don't care if it's a shirt laundry or a pet store.
Right.
If you're a jag-off, you get treated like one. Period. So I guess what this guy was doing
You're being very inclusive.
all right. That's right.
I don't care who you are. I'm going to treat you the same way.
Exactly.
And I don't want to be credited for this. You're just doing what you got to do.
It's like Kramer. I don't want to wear the ribbon.
He doesn't want to wear the ribbon.
So I guess what he was doing was he pulled out of his parking space and he pulled up to the curb cut to pull out, But then he decides he's going to sit here and check his phone. So now Tassie's driving down. She's like, Mike, this happened so fast. She's like, I can't get in because of where this truck is positioned. I look in my rear view mirror, and the guy behind me is closing on me fast, and he's got his face buried in his phone also. So she's like, am I going to get rear-ended? Am I going to what? So she jumps the curb, basically, cuts it, jumps the curb. She gets in. She parks. As she's walking by the truck, she didn't go over to him, but as she's walking by, she was like, sir, you realize you're blocking the driveway. Well, he looks at her, curses her out, and flicks his cigarette at her. Well, she told me that later. All I knew going out the door was, some guy flicked a cigarette at me. I assumed he was walking. I don't know why.
Right.
I step through the door at the same time this jabroni decides he's going to finally move on. So I step through, and then honestly, I step through the door, and I'm like looking left and right, like, okay. The truck pulls out, and he makes a left because he's headed towards the bridge or up Negley Run or whatever. He makes the left. Now he slams on his brakes, and he turns and looks at me, and he yells, "Oh, big tough guy standing in the door." And I went, well, yeah, I mean, I just came out.
This is a gym. We all look tough.
I said, yeah, I just came out. So now he goes, whoo, whoo. He's like, whoo.
And he's on Washington Boulevard.
Yeah. Oh, you start like in the lane.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'll come around.
Oh, boy.
So now I lean against the railing, and I say it loud enough because I want him to hear it, but I don't want to sound like I'm shouting because that's not cool. I lean against the railing, and I was like, you know what? It's going to hurt really bad if you do. So he's like, "Arr!" And I'm thinking, all right, he's going to go and he's going to turn around. Well, now this smaller in stature young man in a security guard uniform comes walking over from the clinic. And very nice young man. He really was. He's like, sir, I'm really sorry about that. And I said, hey, partner, listen, it's not your fault. All right. I said, but do me a favor. I said, this joker comes back around. I said, right now, don't wait. Turn around. Don't run, but walk fast. I go back inside. Just go back inside. It'll be better. So then I get back inside, right? And now our members are starting to, some of them are there. Some of them are coming in. I take a young man who's actually, now he's in Florida in Naples. He owns his own CrossFit affiliate. I take him aside. And I'm
Who
like,
was it?
Alex. You remember Alex? Yeah. I was
Not
like,
to be confused with your father.
No, it wasn't my
Or
dad.
daughter.
It wasn't my dad. Or my daughter. I said, hey, Alex, do me a favor. I was like, get everybody to the front of the room, close to the board, brief them on the workout. Because I'm thinking, this guy's coming back, and I'm already planning on, erasing some of the security tape here in a minute anyway, right? I'm like, it's not my first.
Like you do.
Not my first rodeo. But he didn't, he didn't come back. He was an ass, But I mean, to me, that's, and I remember I was so, like, it's a bad habit I have, but I don't think it takes, I do think it takes a certain level to get me across that line. I don't think I'm volatile. I really don't. No. But I think once
you would have been in a lot more trouble than you've ever been in.
Yeah.
Like
I think that's fair.
Knowing you as well as I do or don't, I don't think you ever go that. I think there's different lines, because even in going across that line, you're ready to do physical harm if he approached you.
Right.
You weren't going to go get in your car and chase him.
Well, you've had a life of experiences of like where that line is and when you know what to do when you need to do it.
Right. But I think the thing that bothered me, though, and it still kind of does, is like once it takes a lot to get me going, but I think once I am going, it's hard to stop.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, I was like, you know what? You did all this for what?
Right.
For this 105-pound lady who you almost caused to have an auto accident. Because and then they get into
you assault her.
Yeah.
Verbally and to some degree physically.
And I mean, it's stupid. It really is. But that particular spot, and it's almost funny because I can tell so many times I drive in and I'm on Allegheny River Boulevard and it's the morning and I'm in kind of like my little morning meditation, saying my rosary. I actually say the rosary in the morning. And I'm like, all right, no matter what happens today, I got this. I'm gonna be the guy I want to be. Every time.
It's good intentions.
Forget it. I roll in one morning, right? And we had the oh my gosh, this is sad. Remember Paul Shulo?
Oh,
He was a dear friend
Officer
of ours,
Shulo.
City of Pittsburgh police officer. He and two other officers were shot and killed by this coward. And anyway, it was his first anniversary, and we were doing his memorial workout on a Saturday morning. CrossFit's very big. with hero workouts,
Yeah.
for the fallen. And Jen was also training at the time the Plum High School, mind you, swim team. So Jen was like, hey, you know what? It's a beautiful morning. She was like, we're going to train outside. And then when we do Paul's workout, we'll just leave. She's going to build the kids' workout around, the equipment that we'd need. Super. So we're going to do a little tribute inside first. So I'm at the dry erase board. I'm putting up the workout. Well, a lot of Paul's buddies from Bloomfield show up early, right? And they come in and we're like, hey, guys, how are you? Hugs all around and all that. And as we're making small talk, my wife comes in. Now, remember, these are high school kids.
High school swim.
Yeah. My wife comes in, she pops her head in the door, and she goes, you need to get out here. And I'm like, oh, boy.
Speaking of security.
Yeah, so I come out, and as soon as I hit the steps, I look over, and I see the problem. There's this 200 pounds of chewed-up bubble gum in this stupid hat, with his, and he's on his phone, and he's like, So I just like make a beeline over to him and I get right up in his face and I was like, something on your mind? And he's looking, he goes, how much is that barbell, man? What's that? 145? Yeah, I lift that all day. So I look at him and I deliberately I look him up and down and I go, yeah, you look it, And he's talking stupid. And, making reference like to the young ladies. And
he's there
like
with
that.
the Bloomfield guys? Or
Oh,
he's
no.
He's from the...
Correct. Now, but he's you're not supposed to self-drive. So he's at a vehicle, so I can only assume that he's driving for someone. And there's a young man not on the other side of his car, but like he's at the driver's side of this vehicle. There's another young man on the other side of another vehicle. So my take is, well, they're both waiting for someone separate. So he and I kind of have this verbal exchange, and he doesn't realize like I'm trying to push buttons because I'm thinking the more buttons I push, this guy reacts, and then we're done. So he makes a comment to this guy, almost like collegial, like right. So I look at this dude, and he just looks at me and goes, hey man, I'm not with him. I know this guy, right? And long story short, I don't remember why, but we had an exchange, and he's talking to someone on the phone, but he's like talking about what's happening. Mm-hmm. And I go, hang on a second, and I snatch the phone from him, and I'm like, he'll call you back. And I hit the end button, and then I throw it across the street into the underbrush, on Washington. And he didn't. But now he backs down real fast.
Sure.
And I'm thinking, damn right, Navy. I turn around to walk away. There's like all the Bloomfield standing behind me. Right? So all the boys that my friend Louis brought with him, like they all came out. I didn't realize like how long they had been there. So it had much less
That's
to
right.
do.
He is afraid of me.
It had much less.
And all of them.
Yeah, it had much less to do with me than, and I'm like, that's embarrassing.
But what I'm afraid of is running out of time for the first time that we
Man, I
Mike
could go all
Pietragallo.
night.
Yeah, I
I
think
could
we
go
need to
all night.
It was a great
do a
start.
round two.
Yeah, Mike,
a
you
great
got to
start.
come back,
Or
dude.
three.
You
Because I want to
gotta
ask
come
you
back.
about if
My
you've seen
pleasure.
UFOs. We can talk about that later. I mean, you've been out over the ocean.
UAPs.
Now, UFOs.
Bigfoot?
We'll get it.
Chupacabra? Spend some time down there.
Or maybe other things that aren't into that.
I thought I saw El Chupacabra once, but it was a hairy bar dancer.
I knew it. I didn't want to step on the punchline.
Yeah.
She smelled like Chupacabra. Anyhow.
Well, yeah, I think that's it for episode 246. Join us next Wednesday live at 8:30-ish for episode 247. Between now and then, please give us a like or follow on social media and visit us at lunchtimeinrome.com. While there, take our relational needs questionnaire. Thanks for joining us at the table for Lunchtime in Rome.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.